Hey guys, Frank Macaluso here from Garageaholic, giving you another episode of the E24 LT1. I know it's been a long time since we have produced a video here on this project, and that's because I was going through and dealing with a lot of the details and doldrums of this swap. A lot of the stuff that most of my viewers have said is boring, just give us the good stuff. So that's kind of what I want to do here in this episode. We have the LT1 installed right now, as you can see, and we're going to be taking it out. What I did was I did all the wiring. I think I did that in a previous episode. And what we needed to do was fix and identify how we're going to get this air intake routed. Now, I tried using a bunch of different methods, including routing it down and through and going down in through that lower front wheel well piece in order to have a cold air intake. But that did not work. So the reason it didn't work is because it's just too tight in there. You wouldn't be able to have a cooling fan in there. There's a lot of reasons why I decided not to route that air intake that way. The other reason is because I had already set basically the radiator in place and all of all the radiators essentially. The condenser, the radiator, the power steering, the engine cooling, the transmission cooling. So that's 5 right there. And I didn't want to have to move them. But alas, I decided the best thing to do was lower the radiator so that the air intake goes straight through. And the air filter would be installed right down in here where my hand is. So you basically see it through the grill, which is kind of cool. The implications to doing that is that the radiator not only needed to move down about 4.5 inches so that this air intake came through. Let me show you what it looks like. So this is a 4-inch tube with a 4-inch hump hose. This is a rubber hump hose that we're installing here to account for any misalignment, but also really just to kind of make sure that this bends correctly. As you can see, it's going to bend down there straight into here, which I need to trim and then add the K&N air filter in the front for good cold ram air intake. But there is going to be a shroud here that will end up covering all this. As you can see, I had welded a mass airflow sensor installation there, and I need to rewire it so that this actually reaches over there. But the main driver for this was mainly due to just what do I want to modify in order to make this air intake? Do I want to have a chintzy air filter that kind of has some bent aluminum tube like this? No, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make the sacrifice and just move all the other things that I had already designed. So what that means is that the radiator went down, the engine oil lines had to be redesigned, so I have all AN10 lines here. The transmission cooler did have to get rerouted, so now I have the lines going sideways, one there and then one up there. And the power steering cooler is all the way over here as well, which I didn't install it here in this case. And then, of course, I added my condenser. So this is the R134A condenser. And I have my dryer right in the front as well right here. And I have my hoses. So let's take a look at the hoses for the AC and see how that's all going to route. Now, I'm not 100% complete on all of these hoses, but I do have enough in order to be able to remove the engine and make a little bit of an additional room in the chassis for this guy here. Now, this guy installs just like this. This is literally on the compressor. And it installs just like that. As you can see, the 2 lines are right there. And this kind of plugs into that. The problem is that the frame rail is a little too close. And as you know, the engine installs from below. So because of that, it's going to end up hitting the frame rail. So I need to remove the engine, which I need to do anyway because I'm going to be painting the engine bay in this episode. And you know, we need to make room for this when it's installed so that the whole engine goes up with it without having any interference of the frame rail. So what happens is I'll do the let me route it through to you. There are two lines right here. You have your discharge line, you have your compressor line. There's 2 different sizes. As you can see, one is larger than the other. The larger one comes out and literally goes into the compressor. This is the larger one, goes into the compressor. That's the top hole down there, right there. Comes out of the compressor through this guy, which will then go into the condenser. The condenser, let's see if you can see a better view. There it is. That guy. It goes into the condenser. It goes through. That hot compressed gas is it needs to condense, and that's why it goes through what's called the condenser. And it goes through the condenser and it comes out this guy here. There's another line right down there, and that comes out, and then it goes into the dryer, where then literally this dryer, it dries the cold R134 and removes all of the moisture. Comes out of that, and then it goes directly back into here, where it then goes through an orifice into the evaporator inside of the car, where it then goes through an expansion valve, and then it creates that cool air going into the car. So that's basically pretty simple. Remember, there is a pressure switch. That pressure switch does get mounted on the dryer, so there is a port for the switch, which we'll be using an E24 switch. It'll actually not be E24 because that's R12. It'll be an R134 switch, basically. And then that'll get installed on the dryer. But remember, we're going to need to have our ports as well. So the ports are the places where you need to actually fill your refrigerant. That's this guy here. All right, this is your hot side, if you will, and this is the cold side. And this is really where you install all the refrigerant. But as you can see, I mangled some of these guys in order to weld a couple of custom fittings to make this work. So the AC is pretty much well spoken for. Electronics is pretty well spoken for. All of our cooling systems are pretty well spoken for, and all we need to do now is basically remove everything from this setup and get the engine out. So let's do that now. Now that we've removed the engine, we gotta move the engine out of the way, we gotta prep that and the subframe, but we also need to prep the engine bay for paint. What that means is remove everything that's inside of the engine bay out, including wiring, brackets, hardware, and stickers before we can start prepping the bay and getting it ready for that black Schwarz paint. And then we're moving on to final assembly. Now, as you can see, the engine's out. We got a relatively clean engine bay here, but we still need to remove all the things that we possibly can remove without being too intrusive. We got to remove this brake stuff, the clutch master cylinder, reservoir, any additional piping that might be here, and of course this entire wiring loom, along with, you know, all this stuff, right? All this old wiring that we need to kind of recondition as well. We'll do that later on in the episode. But we just need to remove all this stuff so we can just get it prepped and ready for paint. As you can see, I got the two heater hoses here. These two heater hoses are going to end up getting snaked around and going to the two heater hoses that go right onto the water pump outlet. So we have to do that, but that's not going to be until later. We actually have plenty of time to do that. So I'm not really too concerned about it. But it's definitely dirty in here, and we need to get rid of these stickers and just kind of clean this engine bay up a little bit before we really get it ready for paint. Now we're getting the engine bay prepped for paint, and essentially what that means is clean. Clean, grind, flap wheel, and wire brush. Clean it all up, and that allows us to lay our base and then our clear on top of everything. But I wanted to let you know of something else that I've done off scene that might help you guys understand what it takes to do an engine swap like this. And one of those things is bracing the radiator core support. What I did was I literally put a very thick gauge, it was like I believe it was like 11 gauge or 10 gauge sheet metal in here. And I welded it on, as you can see here, I stitched it down in there, and I also welded it up in here. I also welded it on the back, and you'll see that in a second. I also added this brace right here. This is like a cross brace. It's an X brace. It's not an exact X brace since there's a separation here, and I'm not actually going to the corner, I'm going to the edge here. That's because I have to leave room for the condensing unit, the plumbing for the condenser there. But this thing is really, really taut, really strong. From the inside, you can see here that I used a 1/2 inch angle, and I welded the angle all the way around at every location. So this whole core support is just as strong, if not stronger than it was before. Now, if you remember before, there was a piece of metal that kind of went all the way across just like this, and it connected on this side over here. And the reason we're not doing that is because we need the radiator to sit all the way down here, and it's sitting on basically these mounting locations. So as you can see, we've got all of our brackets that are customized on this side for brake booster, and on this side for DME and ECU and wiring harnesses and things like that. So we need to clean all of this. And I mean, look at all this that we have here. We have to vacuum all this out. We have to clean it all up. We have to do a, what's it called? What's it called? Like a mineral spirits on this, and clean it all up. I also removed all of the insulating material from the firewall because this firewall was in really bad shape. All of that stuff was in bad shape. We're going to paint this, and we're going to cover it with a Dynamat, so it's going to look really, really sharp. And you know, all this stuff has to be cleaned out. We got to clean out these lines, push them back, get ready for paint. And then, as you can see, I did the harness as well. So we got basically this car is almost ready, just except for cleaning. So let's do a quick time lapse and clean the damn thing. That's right, the beard is getting longer, and that is because time is elapsing as I completely masked off this entire car, and now I am ready to paint the engine bay. I have cleaned and masked everything off. As you can see, everything is plugged up where it should be, and everything is cleaned up. As you see, everything here, that's black, will end up getting sprayed. The primer, it'll be an epoxy gray primer, and then we're going to do a base coat, clear coat black. So all of that will be completely painted. And what we need to do now is basically get the car on the ground and get it rolling back that way through that garage so that we can then roll the car back, lay our paint, and then bring it back in, because I'm not going to be painting it in this garage, even though most of everything is already kind of covered up. But we do want to just paint this. So today we're going to start off with our epoxy base clear. All right, now I'm done with the first coat, and actually it isn't too badly ventilated in here. Just having a couple fans just blowing right out of the garage actually helped quite a bit. But we do have our epoxy primer coat on right now. We're gonna do a little bit, we're gonna wait a while until this thing completely dries. It's about 55 degrees in here, so it's a little bit on the cold side. So we're gonna end up taking probably a few hours to let this thing dry, and it needs to dry completely. All of this, the drying requires the VOCs to be released from the paint. If you put another coat of paint on there, or the base coat, before this has a chance to completely evaporate, it's going to never fully harden. And then the base coat is not going to lay right, and the clear coat's not going to lay right. Now, this is not going to be a perfect paint job, but it's going to be way, way better than it was. And as you can see, I have all of these brackets here, so that all needed to be painted as well, so it can at least match to make it look like it was semi-factory built. So what we need to do now is wait a little bit and just take a look in a few hours after, right before we're about to put the base coat on. So we've waited about a full day for this thing to completely harden. It's important, by the way, that the primer hardens, because if that primer is not completely cured and dried, it's going to cause problems. And in this case, it is completely dry, and I feel very confident in being able to add that black base coat on here. In fact, last night, just for fun, I did add a little bit of black base coat here, and then I sanded it down today just to kind of see how it looked, and it's going to lay down really nice. So I feel pretty confident that this is going to end up working out to be a very, very good solution. Now what we need to do is wheel the car out. All right, second coat is on. You can see how it looks here. It's not shiny, it is definitely matte, but what I really care about in terms of like aesthetics here is I want this shelf to look really good. I want the wheel wells to look good. You gotta remember, guys, we have a ton of stuff to put in this engine bay. The entire braking system is gonna be all over here. Power steering stuff is gonna be right here. All the electronics is gonna be right in here. And we have AC lines, we have heater core lines, we have 5 radiators right in the front here, and it's going to be very crowded. So I want it to look, I want it to be more protected than I want it to look good. So I'm gonna be a little bit heavy with that second coat of clear. I'm gonna do 2 coats. One light coat, let that get tacky, and then put on a second heavier coat on, and then that's gonna be the shiny coat, is that second one. But I want it to be functional. I want it to be protected because I added a lot of metal brackets. I added a lot of stuff. So I want to make sure that everything is protected from corrosion. Then I want it to look good. I think it's going to look good anyway, but I want it to actually be more functional than aesthetically pleasing. Now what we're using for our clear coat is a Wanda 8100. This is like a 2K clear polyurethane. It is a 4:1 mix ratio with the hardener. And this right here is the hardener. It's a 3093. So basically put 4 parts of this into here to 1 part of this. So essentially, in real layman's terms, is that I don't really use these very often, right? I don't use this too often. What I do is I just use the numbering scale. So I try to put it into terms of whole numbers that I can understand. So 4:1 means if I do 4 ounces, then that means that I fill up to the 5th with, so from 4 to 5 with the hardener. So it's 4 parts clear, 1 part hardener. So you can scale that up. So if you do the math, and I don't want to spell this out for you, but if I did 12 ounces of clear, that means I would fill up from 12 to 15 with the hardener. So it's a 4:1. So I'd add 3 parts of the hardener for the 3 parts of clear that I'm doing. Okay, so what we need to do is now fill it up with clear, mix it around, pour it in, and start spraying. 2 coats of clear are now on, and this thing is shiny. But I need to bring it in the garage. I want to get the fans exhausting even more so we can get all this overspray out of here. So let's bring the car in, and then let's take a look and see how this thing completely turned out. Let's take a break from the paint job before we reveal the final results and talk about what I did here on this pedal assembly. Now this pedal assembly was modified in a number of ways in order to accommodate the V8 engine fitting inside of the E24 engine bay. The first thing was obviously the brakes. Now the brakes kind of look seemingly unchanged, however there's a big modification. The pedal was modified to make room for the input of the booster. And so that was moved to the right about 1.25 inches. And as a result of that 1.25 inch movement, we needed to change its pivot point up above and where it connects to the rod going into the brake booster. Now, as a result, it feels and looks completely unchanged, but behind the scenes, a lot's changed. The second thing that I had to do was modify the clutch pedal. Now, I didn't modify anything within the pedal or the assembly, but what I did do was add the Chevy clutch pedal sensor integrated into the pedal assembly. Now, what that means is that as you press the clutch pedal, it moves this potentiometer that's installed, meant for the LT1. As you press the clutch pedal in, it moves the potentiometer, changing the resistance value as you're pressing. And it also completely goes back to its stock position. Now, this actuator here can be removed and easily serviced so that this part can be removed. As you can see here, this resistance value changes as you rotate the assembly. BMW has it, Ford has it, Chevy has it. Everybody has this type of assembly, and I just adapted the Chevy one for the use in this E24 application. What that means is that we can actually adapt cruise control. We can adapt rev matching for shifting. It knows the clutch pedal position, so it'll know that you can't start the engine until the clutch is pushed in, which for many enthusiasts is kind of a drag, but it's important for the proper functionality of the engine and starting and operating and all of the cool features that you'll get by having a clutch pedal position. So this thing is actually really cool. I'm very proud of it. It's been completely refurbished and painted and welded and set up and ready to be installed in our final assembly stage. Now back to the paint. All right, so that's it. 2 coats of clear, laid it on pretty thick on that second coat, and it is shining up really good for an engine bay, right? It's not perfect, but it's really good for an engine bay. Next steps here on this is after we demask everything, we want to start putting the Dynamat on the rear firewall, and we want to start painting all those other components that we need in order to rebuild everything. Now, there's an order of operations to do this, and we'll cover that in the next episode as we start our final assembly, both inside the car and out. Thanks a lot, guys, for watching. My name is Frank Macaluso, and you take it easy. Later.